Wired. D&D must grapple with the racism in fantasy, and getting rid of it will take a lot of work. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am the Anti-Woke Warrior. I discuss all things woke. That includes the female takeover of the Western world, along with the degradation of the white race and men in general. Thank you all for stopping by. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure that you're still subscribed. Watch the video to the very end, because at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a list of role-playing games that you can play instead of Dungeons & Dragons, because apparently Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, is just too toxic to play anymore. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. I threw my back out. It just went out on me one day. Wasn't really doing anything. So I'm on the good stuff. We'll see how this video goes, because I got like narcotic painkillers and muscle relaxers and steroids. So all of the things are going on. But we're going to take a look at this article here. Dungeons & Dragons has been accused of being racist for years now. Tolkien was accused of being racist in this century repeatedly. The thing is, I played D&D a lot. I've played a lot of role-playing games in my life. I've played D&D probably more than any other role-playing game. The only other role-playing game that I maybe played as much as D&D is something called the Hero System, which you should play. I might have played the Hero System more than D&D, but probably not, because D&D is like the McDonald's of role-playing games. By the way, D&D is terrible. If you play Dungeons & Dragons, believe me when I tell you this, D&D has always been terrible. It is a garbage game. It has been bad ever since its inception. The only thing that D&D has ever done good are a couple of things. Those are the novels, the comic books, and some of their ideas are really cool, like Dark Sun. That wasn't actually developed by D&D, is my understanding. It was developed by another guy who sold it to D&D. People like Ravenloft. I don't like Ravenloft because it's all about undead stuff, and I don't understand how something can come back to life and then be killed again. It doesn't make any sense to me. What do I know? And then the Spelljammer is like quaint. That's got some quaintness to it. It's pretty interesting. It's, you know, Dungeons & Dragons in space. So kind of interesting. Sailing around on ships in outer space and everything. So there are some interesting ideas. The novels, amazing. I mean, I've had some of the best books I've ever read were written in the D&D universe. I can't even describe to you how good some of these books are. In fact, my favorite books all are D&D books, amazingly enough. But the game itself is just, believe me, there are so many better games out there. Like almost every single game in the universe, tabletop role-playing game, is better than D&D. I mean, it's literally like the lowest 10 percentile D&D, at least, probably the lowest 1 percentile as far as good games are concerned. So. And I may be rubbing a lot of you the wrong way, but believe me, I played a lot of games. D&D, the setting is great. If you like medieval fantasy, D&D does it good. But the rules of the game, oh man, the rules of the game. That could be like a whole video series that would be never ending of me discussing the rules of Dungeons & Dragons and how bad they are. Okay, let's get to this article. I'm sorry I took so long to rant.
And that's what really grinds my gears.
Orcs are human beings who can be slaughtered without consequence or apology. This damning assessment of one of fantasy's most ubiquitous villains comes from N.K. Jemisin, titan of modern fantasy and slayer of outdated genre tropes. As kinda sorta people, she writes, orcs are fruit of the poison vine that is human fear of the other. The only way to respond to their existence is to control them or remove them. Well, her name is N.K. Jemisin, so I'm assuming that she's an idiot. Just because. What is she doing out of the kitchen? I mean, you know, I got a serious sandwich deficiency going on here, and you're out here writing books and trying to muscle your way into my hobby, which we have been told from authoritative figures is not diverse and inclusive. What are you thinking, Miss Jemison? I'm assuming you're a miss because nobody would want to marry such a toxic, evil individual. So we don't care what you have to say. What is an orc? To their creator, j.r.r. Tolkien, they are squat, broad, flat-nosed, sallow-skinned, with wide mouths and slant eyes. In fact, degraded and repulsive versions of the least lovely Mongol types. Okay, so J.R.R. Tolkien thought of them as part of the Mongol race, which is what we commonly think of today as Asian, who are from Eastern Asia. More than half a century after Tolkien wrote that description in a letter, here is how Dungeons & Dragons describes the orc in the latest monster manual, where all such demi-humans are relegated. Orcs are savage raiders and pillagers with stooped postures, low foreheads, and piggish faces. Half-orcs, which are half-human, and therefore playable according to players' handbook rules, are not evil by nature, but evil does work within them. Some venture into the human-dominated world to prove their worth among other, more civilized races. Okay, here's an issue. Guess who's racist in this whole shebang here as far as Dungeons & Dragons races are concerned? The orcs. The orcs are the racist ones. The orcs want to destroy humanity. They really want to destroy the elves. They really despise elves. They don't like dwarves. They don't like halflings. They don't like gnomes. They don't like any of the so-called goodly races. There are many different races in Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, they are races. They are different creatures with different physiologies, when we'll discuss that too as we go through this article. Well, okay, so j.r.r. Tolkien gave a physical description of the orc. Maybe that's what he wanted them to look like. Maybe he wanted that to be just kind of the base of what they look like, and they were actually more bestial. But that's what he wanted them to look like. Doesn't mean that he's saying anything against the Asian people or Mongoloids, any of that. I have pulled up here, in spite of the images I've already shown you of orcs, the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual on AnyFlip, which is a website where you can go to get all of Dungeons & Dragons 5e books. And here is the entry for orc. Do they look like they're Asian? All right, back to the article. Genetic determinism in a, should be medieval fantasy tradition, because fantasy is anything that isn't real. Like Magnum P.I. is a fantasy. It was set in the 1970s, 1980s in Hawaii. It was filmed contemporarily, but it's a fantasy, still the same. This is another thing that drives me up the wall. I know this is established verbiage. The word fantasy means medieval fantasy, but
You know what really grinds my gears?
dwarves are miners and forgers. Half-orcs are rampagious, are they? I never saw that in any of the writings of D&D. Elves have otherworldly grace and enjoy poetry. Dark elves, known as drow, it's a drow, R-O-W spells row, so it's a drow, have skin that resembles charcoal. Well, it's actually pitch black skin, and not all charcoal is pitch black. And are associated with the evil spider queen Lolth. That is their primary deity. They're not associated with the evil spider queen Lolth. Lolth is a goddess. It is their primary deity. As both a rule set and a fantasy backdrop, D&D is in the business of translating these racial differences into numerical scores. Dwarves get extra points when they try to hit something with a battle axe. Elves get +2 dexterity. Half-orcs' savage attack lets players reap extra damage off a critical hit, all because of their race. Okay, there are issues here. Dwarves should not get a +2 to hit with a battle axe. And I don't remember what version of Dungeons & Dragons that happened in. I don't think it was any version. But okay, let's go with that. Elves get a +2 to dexterity. Why? Because they have different physiology than humans. They have better hand-eye coordination. They are fleet of foot and more flexible. Ergo, greater dexterity. They have all of those qualities. It's described in their descriptions when they're talking about the race. Half-orcs savage attack, that was something that was introduced in more recent editions, I think starting in 3.5. Okay, so they can brutally attack something. They're bigger and stronger. I don't think they should have that because half-orcs have a natural innate strength bonus that makes them more likely to do more damage just because they can. As I play Dungeons & Dragons, especially as I played role-playing games, especially as I got older, I stopped giving racial skill bonuses. It's like the elves, they didn't put this in there. Elves get a bonus with longsword and longbow. I stopped doing that. It's like why does an elf inherently have the ability to shoot a longbow better or swing a long sword better than anybody else? It's part of their cultural heritage, but the elf does not necessarily have to come from their cultural heritage. They could have been an orphan. They could have been raised in a tribe that didn't use the bow or the sword for whatever reason. So those sorts of things I just abandoned, and as I abandoned D&D, it made more sense because I would get into games, like I mentioned, the hero system, there's others, where you make up your own racial characteristics based on your race's physiology, and anything that is not inherent to your race, then that would be considered something you learn. So if you got a bonus for things that you learned because of your cultural background, you could add that in too, but it would just be tagged as a cultural bonus instead of a racial bonus, because I'm not stupid. Unlike the writer of this article, D&D has mostly shunned the same approach when it comes to gender. The original version from 1974 had no special rules for women player characters. They should have. But a Dragon magazine column from 1976 with the header "Bringing the Distaff Gamer into D&D" gave some women's strength scores a nerf, and they should, because women are smaller and weaker than men, compared to men's, and replaced their charisma scores with one for beauty. Those rules didn't stick. The latest Player's Handbook reminds gamers that they don't need to be confined to binary notions of sex and gender. But in reality, there are binary notions of sex and gender. They are real. They are just the way that we are. And this person who's writing this, they're referring to this Dragon magazine column where, hey, they said maybe we should make women weaker than men because in reality, women are weaker than men. And, oh, we're going to replace charisma with beauty. Okay, it doesn't matter what you call it. You call it comeliness. I mean, there's games that call it presence, comeliness, charisma, charm. There's all sorts of different ways you could term the different attributes of your character. That's fine. That doesn't matter. This is just ridiculous. But Dragon Magazine was a magazine that talked about role-playing games, especially Dungeons & Dragons. Mostly Dungeons & Dragons. Almost exclusively Dungeons & Dragons. So they had an idea in there saying, hey, why don't you play like this? It was an idea you don't have to incorporate into your game. Just like you don't have to incorporate anything that you don't want to into your game. Back to the article. Over the years, however, D&D has made only trivial movements away from racial essentialism. Sure, publisher Wizards of the Coast has removed, for example, half-orcs -2 debuff to intelligence. One faction of orcs has more complex, even humanizing qualities in a recent book. yet the stereotyping remains. Okay. Racial essentialism is not what D&D is doing. These are different things. An orc is not a human. By your logic, I'm not allowed to write a medieval fantasy novel involving orcs because I am not an orc. Huh. I'm not allowed to write about halflings, ogres, trolls, elves. I'm not any of those. I'm not even allowed to write about monkeys because I'm not a monkey. What the heck? I'm not allowed to write about dogs. I'm not a dog. How stupid could you possibly be? Dogs don't have the same intelligence as humans. Therefore, they have a negative debuff, a negative something debuff, as they put debuff here, to their intelligence. Orcs are less intelligent than humans. Half-orcs are less intelligent than humans because they are more animalistic. They also have lower willpower and lower charisma by -2. And this is in 3rd edition, 3.5 edition. In 5th edition, they've done away with all that because, it's terrible to give somebody a negative value on any of their attributes. How dare they? I mean, the little tiny halfling that's only 3 feet tall here standing next to Gandalf, he can be just as strong as Gandalf can be. Because he's, we don't want to have any negatives. Now, there was one caveat to that. In the 5th edition, you can't lift as much, but strength does determine how much damage you do. So you can do as much damage with that battle axe as a 6-foot-tall half-orc could do, even though you're only 3 feet tall. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense because D&D is moving away from trying to simulate reality to trying to simulate stupidity. It has never done a very good job of simulating reality, by the way. Most other games are better. The game's designers know they have a problem, too. In June 2020, when Black Lives Matter protesters swept the country, the D&D development team posted a blog titled Diversity and Dungeons & Dragons. In no uncertain terms, this explained how D&D's 50-year history of characterizing orcs and drow as monsters and evil is painfully reminiscent of how real-world ethnic groups have been and continue to be denigrated. That's just not right, and it's not something we believe in. To make things right, they said D&D would offer new descriptions and possible rule changes for races in supplementary books, and correct some past errors. Okay, the Dark Elves, drow, are Dark Elves because they are evil. They are so evil, their skin turned black, and then they started being called Dark Elves, or drow. Orcs, and my understanding of Tolkien's original work, and I could be wrong because I'm not a Tolkien expert, were perverted elves that were so perverted they turned evil. So I don't know what to tell you. You have to have some sort of adversary in these games, or else it's going to be like the South Park Holiday Christmas Special.
Presents the happy, non-offensive, non-denominational Christmas play with music and lyrics by New York minimalist composer Philip Glass.
As I turn and look into the sun, the rays burn my eyes.
Happy, happy, happy. Everybody
How like a
happy.
turtle the sun looks.
What the hell is this? This is horrible!
This is the most god-awful piece of crap I've ever seen.
Hey, you're the ones who made it this way.
Removing fantasy racism from D&D would take more than a poor vacuum. Think somewhere between a chemical peel and a constructive surgery. You don't need to have, there's no such thing as fantasy racism. It's not a thing. Fantasy, this is a new category of racism all of a sudden. No, there's racism. That's the thing. And if the races in your Dungeons & Dragons game are racist against each other, who cares? It's your game. You can play it how you want to. I knew a guy, every race other than human or halfling was evil in the game. That's it. Only humans and halflings were good. Everything else was adversarial. That's the way he ran. He's allowed to do that. Who cares? It's your game. You do what you want to do. Apparently, we've solved all the world's problems because we have articles about this, something that matters to absolutely nobody with any sense. You can only get so far with a couple of rule changes and a $30 book. D&D is a fantasy game, and fantasy has this unfortunate obsession with anti-intellectual sort of ethnography. You just called me stupid. Thank you. These people live in this place and behave like so by nature. These other people don't get along with them simply because they are civilized and they are uncivilized. Okay, so if that is the case, then that is the case. You're dealing with an alien world and alien people inhabiting that world. It could be divided into we are civilized and we are not civilized sort of situation. And if you read some of the novels of Dungeons & Dragons, this stuff has been handled brilliantly by some of these authors. The depiction of the Dark Elves, the Drow Elves, by R.A. Salvatore, you would think that a race of evil people would just crumble, right? Because you couldn't, you're evil. You're all evil. You're just at each other's throats all the time. The way he has set this up and worked this out, brilliant. I would have never thought of making it work this way, but he did it. D&D co-creator Gary Gygax nods toward fantasy forefather Tolkien, including elves, dwarves, halflings, hobbits, and orcs, were so obvious that Tolkien Enterprises threatened to take copyright action. Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian series and H.P. Lovecraft's horror fiction, the latter focused on the immeasurable horrible other, also served as inspiration for the first D&D rulebooks. Did they really now? If you say so. I can see Conan, but I mean, other than the undead creatures, it's been so long since I looked at the original basic rule set. I have it. I have the original book. It was given to me a long time ago. I don't have the white box, I have the red box. There's a white box and a red box. I don't really know much about the white box at all. Fantasy worlds are by definition made up. Yep, there you go. You're done. Boom. We can all go home now. There doesn't have to be racism. Oh, there doesn't have to be? But if we're trying to simulate reality, human beings are racist against each other and we're all the same fucking species. Do you think even for a fraction of a second that there's not going to be racism if we had another group of people living on this planet that was not human, that we could not interbreed with, that was intelligent? Holy crap! One of us would be dead by now because we would have fought each other to death at this point. It's just human nature. This is just the way human beings are. And we look at the world through our own intellectual lens. Very much. We look at the entire universe. We think that, other races are going to be intelligent like we are if they are intelligent. And it kind of makes sense because, how many different ways could you be intelligent? Yeah, you could have different types of intelligence, but what are they? Are these different types of intelligence going to lead to high tech like we have right here, right now? And it's ever expanding. Our technology is just getting better year on year. So if there's another intelligent species in the world, but they're much more socially intelligent, they understand each other, they can communicate more quickly, more easily, is that going to lead to high tech? Probably not, right? They might not come up with these interesting ideas like electronics and all of the other things that we've done in our modern world. Back to the article. Yet in some fantasies, most cherished text it is almost always present. Helen Young, author of Race and Popular Fantasy Literature, of course, because you have nothing better to do with your time but write crap. And her name is Helen Young. What the hell is she doing out of the kitchen, damn it? You take care of your kids and your husband. Make sure that he is happy every single day. You just, on your knees every single day. And your life will be 100 times better than writing crap like Race and Popular Fantasy Literature. Has cataloged the prevalence of fantasy racism across countless fantasy media. Fantasy racism. You mean racism. I ended up finding that it's rare for a fantasy world not to have an idea of race or racism built into it. Yes, I'll tell you exactly why. Are you ready for this? It's going to blow your minds, despite what I've already mentioned. In fantasy settings, in medieval fantasy settings, sci-fi settings, there typically is more than one intelligent race. So, you can create a lot of drama by having racial animosity between the two intelligent races or the 15 million intelligent races. You know what is a show that doesn't really deal with a lot of racism? Just kind of pushes it out there? Star Trek. There are episodes about racism and that theme does come up sometimes, but typically it's just a show about, hey, look, we're out here adventuring as a group of human beings and some aliens doing our thing. We don't care about your race. It's interesting that way. Particularly in the way that fantasy heroes and beauties are often coded as white. For Howard, desirable women are lily white. Elves, considered a superior race, are fair-skinned and light-eyed. In this work of Tolkien's, she says, pretty much all of their own evil races and even evil individuals, for the most part, are based on anti-black, anti-Semitic, or Orientalist stereotypes. University of California Irvine informatics professor Aaron Trammell has written about this at length as well. Hey, it's not my fault that human beings think that light skin and light eyes and light hair makes you superior. We see this across many different cultures. The highest caste members in India, because India is based on a caste system, socially they have a caste system and used to be much more intertwined in everything that they did. But the lighter skinned people were typically part of the higher caste. I don't know why that is. I don't think that people are better or worse because of the color of their skin, because I'm not stupid. But if the shoe fits, wear it, I guess. What the hell do you want me to do? I don't know what to tell you. I prefer dark-haired people. That's just what I prefer over blonde people. That's what I'm attracted to more so. I don't know why, but hey, that's who I am. It's something Graham Barber, who runs the POC Gamer blog, noticed when he read through the Dragonlance novels, published initially by D&D first publisher TSR. I've not read the Dragonlance novels, but I hear they are freaking amazing. And Dragonlance started as its own thing. It was a homebrew thing. So people were sitting down and playing this thing called Dragonlance. It was based on Dungeons & Dragons rules, which I used to do all the time. I used to make up my own game setting and use Dungeons & Dragons rules, because sometimes I wanted to play something that wasn't Dungeons & Dragons. Sometimes I wanted to play Space Adventure. Well, D&D didn't really have that unless you play Spelljammer, but then it's still limited by old tech. And maybe I wanted some high-tech stuff like lightsabers. Well, hey, I just used the D&D rules to play Space Adventure. They were using D&D rules to play a modified version of D&D where people rode around on dragons and they had friendly minotaurs. Because, minotaurs in D&D are bad guys. But hey, in Dragonlance, they're not. They're just like humans, only they're bigger and stronger and have horns on their head. One character bothered him. The underdog hero, Tanis Half-Elven. As a half-human, half-elf, Tanis felt perennially alone. According to humans, half an elf is but part of a whole being. Okay. It doesn't say which way he's half bad and half good, though. Tanis said in one of the books, half a man is a cripple. Barber wasn't a fan. I'm biracial myself. The animosity Tanis got from everywhere really sort of rubbed me the wrong way. He says, lately, rereading Dragonlance has been painful for him, and not just because of the depiction of biraciality. He points to the gully dwarves. Written as unintelligent subhumanoids, they're portrayed as being profoundly mentally disabled to the point of not really even having a language. Well, damn! I'm going to have to go out and get me the Dragonlance series because that sounds freaking amazing. I wasn't that interested in reading it before, but since I read this, I mean, this sounds like it'll be right up my alley. Look, you imbeciles. Gully dwarves are a different species of creature. It'd be like me saying, hey, you know what, chimpanzees aren't as smart as humans. You racist bastard, you! How dare you say that? Chimpanzees are just as smart and intelligent and capable as humans. No, these are like little hairless apes. Literally, like the gully dwarves are like hairless apes. That's fine. They're aliens. They're not on Earth. They're a different freaking creature. Damn. Man, this makes me so angry. When he began playing D&D, Barber noticed that this sort of lore-sanctioned stereotyping bled out into the game's rule sets as hard and fast racial bonuses, but also in the way people role-played their characters. For example, gnomes get a +2 intelligence, priming them for a life of wizardry. So if players choose to play wizards, they'd often designate their race as gnome and role-play holier-than-thou attitudes. Half-orcs who get bonuses to strength and constitution make great barbarians, so friends role played them as aggro, uncontained. When Barber chose to play a race and a class combinations that strayed from stereotypes, he was looked at askew. No, he wasn't. There was always pressure from the outside for me to make my characters conform to narrow boxes, he says, and even in the absence of such pressure, he would be falling into another trap. Exceptionalism, half-orc scholars, gnome barbarians, exceptional in a world that remains the same. So nobody cares what kind of character you play. It's your choice. I've never played in a group who was like, oh, you're playing a halfling, you got to be a thief. You just have to be, period, because halflings are better at being thieves than anybody else. That's just how it is. Besides which, gnomes get a +1 to intelligence, half-orcs get a -1 to intelligence, and a +1 to strength and constitution. The +2 bonus, the -2 bonus, these are all fabrications of the newer versions of Dungeons & Dragons, which are all crap. Second edition is the only playable version of Dungeons & Dragons, and I will explain why third edition is not playable at the end of the video, so stick around for that. You don't have to play. I would play, typically, when I played standard D&D and when I played Dark Sun, I would play an elven fighter thief. Why? Because I wanted the thieving abilities and I wanted the ability to fight. Those were the things I cared about. Why? You know what? Looking back, those are the abilities I want to have in the real world. Not that I want to go around robbing people, but they have some pretty cool abilities that nobody else got, like sneaking around and climbing on walls and doing all the crazy, like, spider stuff, finding traps and all that fun stuff. Back to the article. Removing fantasy racism from D&D. Yes, fantasy racism from D&D would take more than a pore vacuum. Think somewhere between a chemical peel and a reconstructive surgery. What isn't laid out in source material has been codified in the game's culture. As Stanford University professor Antero Garcia, he's Mexican. We can't have him playing our game. Non-inclusive. What are you talking about? Observed while doing research at gaming cafes in the Midwest for his upcoming ethnography of D&D players. He recalled how, in one group, party mates acted distrustful of a player character whose race was tiefling. Humanoids with infernal heritage who canonically live in ghettos in human cities. They were all friends, but they knew the expectation was to be suspicious, says Garcia. That relationship is racism. Okay, well, tieflings are evil. Their ancestry is half demon, half human, or half elf, I suppose. So, they are by nature less than civilized, less kind than the average person is, because demons are by nature evil. If this is how they want to play their game, though, let them play it. Who cares? It's none of your damn business. If they want to play a game that's 100% based on racism and sexism, that's their business. There's nothing wrong with they're playing a game. They're not saying that they want to do this in the real world. They're not even saying that they have fantasies of doing this in the real world. They're just saying this is how the game is. I played in a game where we went to a city, and it was an elven city. Two of the characters in my group were half-elves. And the elves were like, if they want to come into the city, they have to wear manacles because we're not going to have these half-elves running around. I was an elf, so pure blood, Can I say? You know how it is. character was Sithin. Sithin, a full elf monk warrior. Totally awesome. I had punched people through walls and stuff. It was great. Love it. Of course, this is all in game, right? These are things that you can't do in reality. Do I want to go around punching people through walls in reality? Well, sometimes when they make me angry, yes. Am I going to be able to do that? No, I don't have that ability. That's impossible. I am not freaking the mountain, right? I'm sure he could probably knock some people through some walls. I'm not that big. I can't do that. See, I play these games wanting to have something that I can't have in the real world. To some degree, whether I really want to have that in the real world or whether I just think it's kind of fun to have that in the real world. It might be kind of neat to have that. So we'll do it in game. Doesn't make me less civilized because I want to do it in game. There's lots of things that I've done in game that I wouldn't do in reality. Wizards of the Coast did take one small step in mid-November, putting out a new sourcebook, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, that acknowledges these concerns. According to its rules, players can increase any of their character's ability scores, strength, constitution, dexterity, etc., to better reflect their capabilities regardless of race. That's stupid. So traditionally, dwarves at base get 2 extra points of constitution, 1 extra point because we're talking about 2nd edition, the real edition of Dungeons & Dragons, because in D&D land, they're sturdy. That reinforcement is appropriate if you want to lean into the archetype, but it's helpful if your character doesn't conform to the archetype. Reads Tasha's Cauldron. If you'd like your character to follow their own path, you may ignore your ability score increase trait and assign ability score increase tailored to your character. Mix and match. No, that's stupid. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so in Dungeons & Dragons, you roll your attributes. You roll 3 6-sided dice, and then you add that number. You add up the dice, and then you say, okay, that's, if you roll 12, okay, well, I got a 12 there. Now, you can place those numbers, generally speaking. Most game masters will let you do this. They will let you roll 4 6-sided dice, drop the lowest one, add up the other 3, place that number on whatever attribute you want it to be on. So you can place a high attribute on your constitution in the case of the dwarf, or place a low attribute, or place a medium attribute, whatever. It doesn't really matter which number you place there, and then you can still get the bonus. So if you say, like, oh, look, I have this high ability score, but I don't want that to be on I don't want my constitution to be that high, so just place a low number on your ability, on your constitution. Who cares? You're gonna get that bonus. You should get that bonus because the dwarves are they're not human. Wow, this is what describes them as being different. They want this to be looks only. See, they're trying to make this woke. The woke people say, look, we're only different on our outward appearance. Women are the same as men. They're just as strong. They're just as good at everything that men do. They're exactly the same. The only difference is, women have long hair and they have boobs. That's it. That's the only difference, really. I mean, men can have babies. They're not any different than women. I'm like, no, this is not how this works. You see what they're doing here? They're doing the exact same thing that the woke are doing to our entire society. Days after the supplement was released, Barber penned a blog titled Tasha's Cauldron of No Change. I think a lot of people were really disappointed with it because they were expecting something concrete, says Barber. It didn't address anything. It just made these minor superficial changes. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of stuff in the game remains. Optional rules are optional, he says. Lots of D&D groups were already offering the opportunity to be exceptional within the flawed system. It didn't address the game's deep-rooted racial essentialism. If I say that black people have darker skin than white people, is that racist? Some people might say that it is, but it's not. It's simply a statement of fact. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, just how it is. It has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that black people have darker skin than white people, or white people have lighter skin than black people. If I say that dwarves are hardier than humans, is that racism? No, it's the same thing as what I just said when I said black people are darker skinned than white people. It's just how it is. They are different creatures. Get over it. Wizards of the Coast says they're trying to hire more diverse talent and be more attentive to insights from sensitivity readers. In 2 new books, they're presenting orcs and drow differently. The company has also begun updating older books in D&D's upcoming book, Candlekeep Mysteries. Barber has a byline over email. The company decided to comment to Wired on what next steps beyond Tasha's Cauldron will look like. Meanwhile, as Wired has reported, players are taking matters into their own hands and providing alternative systems for race in D&D. Eugene Marshall, a player and philosophy professor at Florida International University, put out a zine in July called Ancestry and Culture. It replaces race with 2 more nuanced concepts, ancestry and culture. Ancestry is stuff a hero might inherit from biological parents, like walking speed, lifespan, and acid breath. If her parents are both halflings, she's likely hovering around 3 feet tall. Culture, on the other hand, is broader and includes languages, skills, training, and education. So while dwarven culture encourages learning to use a hand axe, that knowledge isn't a given if your dwarf is growing up in a human majority city. No humanoid is naturally stupid or naturally evil. Yes, they are. Tieflings are naturally evil. Orcs are naturally stupid. Their brains just aren't as complex as humans, and tieflings are half demon. So that's That's just how it is. Drow are evil because they have corrupted their souls, and subsequently they turned evil. That's just it. I'm sorry that you think that that's bad in some way, but that's how science fiction works. They say here's some more choices. That's not what this was about. No one was ever complaining because they don't give us enough choices, says Marshall. I would like them to say something like, any sentient creature from the material plane is like a human in that they can be anything they want to be, good, bad, smart, or not smart. That's already exists in the game. What are you talking about? And so races might dictate certain things like whether you have dark vision or a breath weapon, but they just don't dictate your behavior. Yes, they do, as I already explained many, many times. So good, bad, yeah, okay, well, we talked about that. Smart, we talked about that. And not smart, we talked about that. So I've given you rational reasons as to why all of these things exist in Dungeons & Dragons and in every other science fiction setting from Tolkien through Star Trek. So there's no real reason for you to continue on with this beating this dead horse. Wired. The designers of other fantasy role-playing games have chosen to remove race entirely, making everyone play human characters or limiting them to different factions of, say, elves. Anthropos Games describes its early dark as taking place in a world of magic, yes, but not a world of high fantasy where in-game cultures are inspired by respectful and research mashups of real-world mythic traditions. Players can fill in spaces on their character sheet for culture, milieu, and heritage. That's stupid. There are games out there where you can only play a human. You can design your own setting if you play a universal role-playing game, and then you can say everybody's human or everybody's Zublaba. It doesn't matter what race you are. You can call them anything. You can, everybody's an ant. What do you mean ant? What, I got to play an ant? Yeah, but you're like 6 feet tall and you have like bronze skin and you look like a Greek god. So, oh, cool. I want to play that. I want to play an ant. All right? Doesn't matter. Talking about semantics in a fantasy. So get over yourselves. In D&D, the ugliness runs deep, though. The gilded tomes that inspired it and their stalwart protectors after releasing this design. Marshall says he's received harassment from gamers who didn't like his perspective. Garcia, too, says that after he published an article for a niche academic journal about race in D&D, he received emails signed with fantasy names telling him to have a stroke signed level 32 sorcerer for a genre about imagining new worlds. Fantasy fans can lean conservative. Okay, if you think that's leaning conservative to acknowledge that there are differences in race amongst humans, let alone amongst other different creatures, then you're an idiot. The last time I checked, liberals all believe that white people are evil and that any member of any other race cannot make it without white people stepping back and giving them the opportunity to make it. Sounds like racism to me. They're attached to something more deeply ingrained than a negative to intelligence modifier after all. This is how 1978 Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules books read. Races are given advantages or limits, mainly because the whole character of the game would be drastically altered if it were otherwise. That bears repeating. To undo the racial essentialism of D&D would drastically alter the character of the game. It would. Not the mechanics, not the aesthetics, the character, yes. It wouldn't alter the mechanics. The mechanics stay the same. It would alter the aesthetics. Aesthetics and character are basically the same thing. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Yes, it would be a completely different game if you just said, oh, look, my halfling is just like a human, only he's shorter. Oh, well, what advantages? He's just shorter. That's it. No difference. No hindrance, no advantage, nothing. He's just shorter. Okay, well, then you're a human, right? You're just a short human. And that can be reflected in your attributes like strength being lower, period, because you're short. Like, dude, I'm not as strong as the average man. I'm just not, because I'm shorter. And I'm not as short as a halfling. That's just how it is. Those people out there who know me, who've met me in person, can tell you, who are listening to this right now. Hopefully there's a lot of you out there who know me in real life and are listening to this. So yeah, I'm smaller and subsequently weaker than the average male. That's just how it works. I don't know what to tell you. If the average halfling is 3 feet tall, they're going to be weaker than the average human. Let's finish this out. As we've seen, though, the character of a distributed rules-optional game isn't made of paper and ink, stony tropes, or removable stereotypes. First and foremost, it reflects the character of its players. So let me tell you about the games that I played in most recently. I was recently involved in 2 Dungeons & Dragons groups because you can't freaking find anybody around here who wants to play anything other than Dungeons & Dragons, even though it's garbage. I mean, utter freaking trash. The group that I just left recently consisted of me. I'm white. There was a gay man in the group who's openly gay. He's white. He's also a never-Trumper. There was a young man in the group who's like the worst TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God, Trump is evil. Just everything out of his mouth. Trump is evil. And it's like, dude, leave the politics at home. We're here to play the game. There was a Mexican boy with us. He was about 22, 23. There was another like 25-year-old guy. I don't know. I think he was just white, but I mean, he might have been Hispanic of some sort. And then there was an old, probably like 65-year-old white dude. We would be joined by, on occasion, another Mexican man, and it's probably like late 20s. And then there would be sometimes a young woman would show up, not to game with us because she didn't have time. She worked nearby, and so she would stop in just to like see what was going on and like kind of observe. She really liked gaming, but she just didn't have time because she was working when we were playing. But I think she was Middle Eastern. I don't know. She's probably like 24. All right, so that was the group that I left most recently. And then the group before that I was playing in there was me, the white guy. There was a half Mexican, half white guy. There was a full Mexican guy from Mexico. There was two, they're brothers, half black, half Mexican guys. There was another Mexican guy that would show up every once in a while. And then there was a guy who said he was white, although he looked, aside from his skin tone, and every other way he looked like he was Hispanic. Black hair, the Hispanic features, everything. It's like, dude, I would pick you out as Hispanic if you didn't say anything. I would have thought you were Hispanic. So that tells you the two groups that I played in, and they were both, they want to play D&D. And the problem with D&D, one of the main problems is people don't want to play a role-playing game when they play D&D. They want to play a dice rolling game. I'm not here to roll dice. I'm here to have an adventure. So let me tell you about some games that you should play and why D&D 2nd Edition is the best edition. First off, we'll start off with why D&D 2nd Edition is the best edition. D&D 1st Edition and basic D&D are crap. The rules in 1st Edition, in basic Dungeons & Dragons, and in 2nd Edition Dungeons & Dragons are all convoluted. They make no sense. Sometimes you roll high, sometimes you roll low. You have exceptional strength, which is just ridiculously stupid. The saving throws are kind of stupid. I mean, I know where they came from. I did some research. I found out why they have saving throws in here. You're stuck with classes and races, or classes and levels in every version of Dungeons & Dragons, which is just a nightmare. You don't get to control your character's progression. Okay, so then 3rd Edition Dungeons & Dragons comes along. And it's a big improvement on the rules. Superficially, we see that it's a big improvement on the rules. You have 4th Edition, which apparently was garbage, and then you have 5th Edition, which is total garbage, and I can't even freaking stand that game. Now, 3rd Edition didn't last long. It turned into 3.5. So when you say 3rd Edition Dungeons & Dragons, you mean 3.5. I don't think I ever played 3rd Edition. I might have played it once. I played 3.5 enough to know. It was a good game. It's not bad. It's probably an improvement over 2nd Edition Dungeons & Dragons. I will be honest with you and say technically it is probably an improvement over 2nd Edition Dungeons & Dragons. All of a sudden, the rules are all streamlined and make sense. However, I know that in 5th Edition, which is based on 3rd Edition, there are too many damn rules. You have literally hundreds of rules just to play the game. Just to play the game. Like, you don't have to introduce magic at all. Just have no magic in there. You still have hundreds of rules that are required to play the damn game. 3rd Edition, as I recall, also has a lot of rules. That's the beauty of 2nd Edition. It was better than Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but it didn't have so many rules as 3rd and 4th and 5th Edition. It has like 20 rules. Yeah, the rules are convoluted. They make no sense, but there's only 20 of them. You can memorize those, and then you can move forward with the game. When you get into 3rd Edition, now maybe I'm wrong because it's been a long time since I played 3rd Edition. I didn't play it that much. I didn't play it nearly as much as I played 2nd Edition. You get into 5th Edition definitely has like entirely too many rules. Like, god damn, what the hell? Literally, there's hundreds of rules to play the game, and I'm like, you don't need that many rules. You don't need a lot of rules to play a game. I'm going to tell you right now. Let's go through the games that you should be playing. Talislanta. Talislanta is 100% free. Let's go to talislanta.com. They have released a 5e edition. That's a Dungeons & Dragons edition. So it uses the same rules as Dungeons & Dragons. Waters down the world of Talislanta, makes it really stupid, and makes it not worth playing. Don't play 5th edition. Go to the Talislanta for free right here. The core rule books for all of these 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 10th anniversary, 20. Don't play Die 20 system. Play 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th edition. 4th and 5th edition are very different from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd are very similar. The reason I'm bringing up this first is because this game is most like Dungeons & Dragons for those of you who want to kind of stick to the traditional role-playing system. Here they are. Here are the books. You just download them right here. They have original PDF. They have optimized PDF. Optimized PDFs is all cleaned up. There's no extraneous lines. There's no crooked text. Nothing. They're beautiful. They're perfect. They don't care that you download them for free. They want you to. There's more game books for this game that you can find on eBay and on Amazon. And they have like all sorts of, they have 58 different races in here. The reason this is like D&D, you just said that you would never play a game with classes and levels, and this game has classes and levels. Yeah, this game has classes and levels. They're really called their archetypes, and then your archetype has a level. Except when you get to 4th edition and 5th edition, they've done away with that. But the thing is, you don't have to use your level. You don't have to stay within your archetype for the most part. You can go like, hey, I'm an archetype that's a fighter only. I want to learn how to use magic. Okay, you can. And you can learn it on your own terms, in your own way, instead of going, in D&D, your character class, your 1st level, hey, I want to get this cool 5th level ability. You can't. You can't do that. Why not? I'll forego all of my other abilities just to get this one 5th level ability. No, you can't do that. You got to go through all the steps to get to 5th level, which may take you years of play. Probably only weeks, but still, it might take you years of play to get that far, to get that cool ability that you want. If you have chosen a character class in D&D that is not going to be useful in the game, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do. You can do multi-class, but then you got to start over from level 1, basically. So it's like, all right, well, I have something that might be useful now, but I'm too weak in those abilities, and I'm never going to catch up to the rest of you guys in those abilities, in those areas. So I'm never going to be useful to the group. This is why I can't stand levels and classes. You put levels and classes in a game, and if your character is garbage, you don't get to control where your character goes. You have no control over how your character develops, period. You are at the whims of the game. It's super frustrating. The next game you should be playing, Atlanta, is Shadowrun. Shadowrun. Let's go to images, and we'll look at Shadowrun books. Here we go, Shadowrun. Shadowrun is like Dungeons & Dragons meets cyberpunk, if you know what cyberpunk is. It's set about 50 years in the future. Here you go. Here's some of the different peoples we can see. We have an elf, an orc, a human, a troll, and a dwarf. Those are the main 5 races inside of Shadowrun. If you get supplementary books, they add in other races. You can play like hobgoblins and giants and ogres and things like that. So you can have more fun with it that way if that's what you're interested in. But it's magic meets high tech. So you got cybernetic implants with magicians, with like going into the matrix in the computer and all that sort of fun stuff. So you get guns. You get the best of both worlds. It is a game that does not incorporate classes and levels. There's sort of a class sort of system where you pick an archetype, but you're not stuck within that archetype really unless you want to play like a wizard or a mage or something. You kind of want to stay on that path. But this is a really fun game. It's got a really good system. It's got a very realistic system, a system that matches up with reality really well, really closely. The guys I was gaming with in the last group, one of them said to me, D&D is easy. All you have to do is roll a die 20 and add stuff. You ever played a hard game like Shadowrun? I'm like, dude, Shadowrun, all you have to do is roll a die 6. That's all you got. You don't even have to add stuff. You just, I rolled a 6-sided die, okay. In fact, you roll like a bunch of 6-sided dice and you count the highest one. That's way easier than rolling a 20-sided die and then adding like sometimes you have 5 different things modifying your roll in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Like, so you got to add on 5 different numbers? Get out of here with that crap. The next game is Hero System. Hero System is still in publication. I believe it is 6th edition now is their latest edition. They have 5th and 6th edition still in publication. Here's 5th edition revised, which is what you want to get. And then 6th edition. I've never played 6th edition, never looked at it. I've heard it's got some really weird changes to the rules. Here's an old version of it. This is 3rd edition, I believe, or 4th edition. Maybe. This is the core rules. But it's a game where you can play anything you want to play. If you want to play space adventure, you can. If you want to play medieval fantasy, you can. If you want to play superheroes, you can. If you want to play grim and gritty super spies, you can. If you want to play modern day action spies, you can. If you want to play Old West, if you want to play pirates, if you want to play Stone Age fantasy adventures, go right ahead. The rules right here in one book, you can play anything you want to. Anything you want to. Now, there's going to be growing pains when you pick up these new books, this one especially because there's a lot of rules in here because you can do anything with it, and they try to cover every single possible option. Another good one is GURPS. GURPS stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System. There's the basic set, so you can get the basic set. I don't know if it's still in publication, but you can find GURPS, and you can play GURPS. They have books, obviously, you can see. You can play Cyber World, Martial Arts, Auto Duel, whatever that is. You got Psionics, Fantasy, Old West. See, you can play anything you want to play with GURPS. It's another die 6 role-playing system. GURPS I highly recommend. What's another one? Big Eyes, Small Mouth. Big Eyes, Small Mouth. Amazing game. Very, very good. Very simple game. Very easy game to play. It's still in publication. They just released I think the 5th or 4th edition recently, a few years ago. I am only familiar with one edition, which I think is the 3rd edition. I think they released the 5th edition just recently, but it's anime. It's basically the anime role-playing game. And what can anime do? Anime can do anything, right? You've seen anime graphic novels. You've seen anime shows. They cover a wide range. This is the version that I have. 2nd edition, so that's the one I'm familiar with. They have a wide range of genre that they cover. It's a really good game. I recommend this one highly. Another one is Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds. I don't know if I've ever played this. I might have. I don't recall. I've played 49 different games in my life, so I don't remember that this is it right here. It's still in publication. Check it out. I've read it a little bit. I don't know if I've ever played it, like I said. But yeah, it seems like it's got a good system. It's a good game. Another really good game is the Die 6 system. The Die 6 system, you can download here it is. Here's the image of it. This is what the cover looks like. You can just type in, check this out. I'm not even joking. PDF here. You can find a PDF of it and download right here. Here it is. Here's the PDF. 83 pages. And I mean, there's only writing on like 70 of them. Some are just like images and stuff. Some are character sheets. Like here's a character sheet. You don't need to read that. 70 pages. And you have everything that you need to play whatever you want to. Personified cats in a medieval fantasy. Fine, go ahead. It's right here. It's free. Download it. You don't need any other game system. You can just play this one. And it's got a very simple system. This is the simplest one out of all of the games I've mentioned here today. This is the simplest system. And it's a very realistic system at the same time. There was a game that I played. It was a homebrew game where the guys, they came up with a system. It was 4 dice you rolled. You rolled 4 6-sided dice. One of the dice stood for storytelling. One stood for success or failure. One stood for injury. And I don't remember what the other one was for. If you rolled a 1 or a 2, you failed at what you were trying to do. You got injured. Or the game master told the story. If you rolled a 3 or a 4, you might not have gotten injured, or you got like a superficial wound, or you only partially succeeded, or you and the game master shared storytelling. If you rolled a 5 or a 6, you told the story, you succeeded, you didn't get injured, etc. Very simple system that allows you to get into story. If you just want to roll dice, fine. Just go roll dice. Play Liar's Dice. There's lots of different dice games out there you can play. You don't need to play a role-playing game. Stop wasting my time and your time on something that's awesome. And stop playing D&D. It's crap. Thanks for watching. That's all I got for this time. I'll see you in the next video.